So we're in Vayishlach. Okay, I want to welcome. Where's Mr. Roy Mastoff? Master.
Mustard without the G.
Master without the G. What G?
Well, what's mustard without the G?
I don't know what's
Mustard without the D.
M-A-S?
Mustard.
Oh,
the D at the end.
Mustard. I got
The
it.
D, not the G.
Okay. So what we do here, if Danny maybe explain to you, we do an hour and then we take a break and then we do another hour. And the first hour today is going to be a little bit of a parsha, and we'll do some Rambans, commentaries of the Ramban, and then we'll have a chance. We'll talk a little bit about a piece of Nesivos Shalom, which is the Slana Rebbe. A second. Okay. Okay. So I'll tell you what I want to look at. I want to look at chapter 35. Chapter 35.
Maybe let them share one and you share one.
Yeah. All right. So what I want to do, two Rambans with you, and then we'll see how much time we have. I'm on page 186. Okay. We're looking at the Chumashim for a moment. So the part of the parsha we're looking at, okay, is there's a lot that goes on in the parsha. The first half of the parsha talked about Yaakov meeting with Esav, and you will remember, which you were here on Tuesday, that we talked about the fact that a lot of what happened is a precursor, according to the Ramban, what will happen in the future for the Jewish people. With the fight with the angel of Esav was symbolic of the fact that Esav, or the Romans, or the enemies, or the non-Jews can weaken us, can destroy some of our descendants. That's the Yerach Yaakov, the thigh, is near the male organs, and therefore that's a symbol of how we can be weakened, but can never overcome us. And no matter if one nation, if one group of non-Jews wants to knock us down, we have another country where we're being treated properly. And there are different types of generations which had different types of persecutions, and some were much more difficult, but the bottom line is the Jews will always survive, and that is the promise made to Yaakov. And then after that happens, and they separate, and the next event that happens is about Dinah, which is a very difficult parsha. I think maybe next year we'll try to come back to that if we have time. I'm not sure we'll get to it this year. And then the second half, at the very end of the parsha, the second half of the parsha deals with two very specific events. One is that Yaakov is now returns home. And finally, on the way home, a nursemaid of Rivka's dies. We're going to show you that psukim, and then actually Rachel dies. So if you look in chapter 35, there are two psukim we're going to focus on. We'll look in chapter 35, 186. Vayomer Elokim al Yaakov. This is after leaving Esav. Vayomer Elokim al Yaakov, Kom alei Beit El, go back to Beit El, v'shev sham. V'aseh sham mizbeach lo'el hanarei lecha. Make for mizbeach for God who appeared to you. B'varchacham b'nei Esav achicha, when you ran away. You make 186, page 186. Okay. You're going to make a sacrifice. Yaakov speaks to everybody. He says, get rid of any idols you may have, sanctify yourself, purify yourself. We're going to go up to Beit El. I'll make a mizbeach. And they give to Yaakov all their idols, or Elohei Nechar, strange gods. They bury them, and they continue. They move along, and in verse 5 and 6, Yaakov finds that there's a fear of the nations have about him. No one chases him. And he builds a mizbeach in verse number 7, and he calls the place El Beis El, because there God appeared to him when he ran away from his brother Esav, and now he's on the way back. And then we have in verse 8 a very, very, very strange verse. Who passes away in verse 8? Dvorah, Vatama Dvorah Meneked Rivka. Dvorah, who is the wet nurse, the nursemaid of Rivka, dies. Vatikaver mitachad leveit el tachad alon. She's buried beneath an alon tree. They translate it as a plateau in English. Tachat alon vayikrosh mo alon bachud, and they call the place Alon Bachud. And then that's the one verse, and then God appears to Yaakov again on the way home, as he comes from Padan Aram, he blesses him, and in verse 10, 11, and 12, this is actually very important because here God actually gives the patriarchal blessing to Yaakov. Remember, this is the whole story of Bereshit is about Avram getting the blessing, which is about inheriting the land plus being fruitful, Yitzchak getting the blessing, and Yaakov getting the blessing. Now that he fought with the angel of Esav, and it looks like he beat the angel, so there's nothing in his way, so God says to him in verse 10, 11, and 12, your name is not going to be called Yaakov, it's going to be called Israel, Yisrael, Ve'koshmo Yisrael. And God says to him, Ani kel shakai preyovei, I'm the God of your, I'm the God of Kel Shaddai, be fruitful and multiply. Here's the blessing of fruitfulness. Goyal kahal goyim yiyem meko, you'll have many nations will come from you. Malachim echalotzecha yetzeyu, you'll have kings that will come from your loins, so you will have descendants. And and the land which I promised to Avram and to Yitzchak, I'm going to give to you and your descendants, and they will inherit, they will have the land. Okay, so this is actually shows that Yaakov is the continuation of that blessing, clearly receives the blessing from God, and that's the story of what Sefer Bereshit is all about. To Avram, to Yitzchak, to Yaakov is given this blessing, which has two components. One is to be multiplied, fruitful, and the other is to get the land. So far, so good. Verse 13, he leaves the place, he builds a matzeva, builds a monument, or a place to bring carbonot. He brings nesach, he brings shemen, he brings wine on it. He calls the place where God spoke to Beit El. It's a recap of what it was. And then in verse 16, 17, 18, and 19, we find the death of Rachel. They leave Beit El, and they came a little bit of a kivrat eretz. I'm not sure how they translate kivrat eretz. Their stretch of land to go to Ephrat. And Rachel gave birth, and she was actually had difficulty in labor. She's having difficulty in giving birth. The midwife says to her, don't worry, this is also for you a son, and she dies. She calls him Ben-Oni. Father Yaakov calls him Binyamin, and she's buried. She's buried along the way to Ephrat, which is Beit Lechem. And Yaakov put some kind of monument on her kfura. This is the kfura, Matzevet Kfurat Rachel Ad Hayom. Okay? So, why does Rachel have difficulty in childbirth? What kind of difficulty do you think this would be? Childbirth is actually very dangerous.
Yeah.
Right? Most women who died in childbirth died from hemorrhaging. Right? The kid was hemorrhaging. The child wants to get out. So it's not clear what exactly was the difficulty here. If the birth canal was not wide enough, or there was some other complication in delivery. But delivery in general was a very dangerous process. But we do have one hint. And this is what some of the later commentaries point out what the difficulty was, and that is the child is coming out. The baby is coming out. What does the midwife say to Rachel? Don't worry, push, because don't worry. What does she say to him? Al-Tiri in verse number 17. Don't be afraid, because Kigam Ze Loch Bain. How would the midwife know it's going to be a Bain? She obviously sees. Right? Now, she sees it's going to be a son. She sees the feed.
So he's coming out
like a breech birth. It's a breech birth. It's a breech birth. It's clear that it's not said openly, but it looks like the issue that is going on here, the reason she's having so much difficulty is the child is presenting breech first. When the child comes out head first, that's much easier. Everything kind of compresses together. Breech first is coming out backwards. Yeah. So it looks like this is what goes on. The child is having difficulty being delivered. She probably hemorrhages because of the delivery, and she dies. But it's clear if the midwife can identify the child as a boy and she's still delivering the child, it's clear it's a breech delivery. It's very clear. Okay, you don't need a Ramban to tell you that. Ramban does not discuss that, but it's clear that's what the difficulty seems to be here. And she dies. Okay, is that a question? All right, now that's a simple pshat. And most people miss that point.
Yeah, because we just think that she's just saying son because it's...
Right, she's saying son, keep going, but she's saying son and she still can't deliver the child.
Yeah.
Right, so it means that the head is stuck or the torso is stuck because the child is coming down breech first.
Right.
Okay? So the child is half out and the rest of the body is stuck in the birth canal. Okay, so two things I want to talk about. One, I want to talk about this, the second thing I want to talk about is where Rachel is buried. And I told you it's a very important Ramban because Ramban actually identifies the place when he gets to Israel. And the first Ramban that I want to talk about is the death on the page before in verse number 8 of Dvorah. This is what page we find on 186. We started reading on verse number 8 that Dvorah, the Meinekes of Rivka, the wet nurse of Rivka, dies and she's buried in Beit El under the alon, either under a plateau or under a tree, and it's called Alon Bachut. Why is that important for us? Who really cares? Who is this Dvorah person? We don't know of any individual, any wet nurse of Rivka. And if we do know of a wet nurse of Rivka, if she is such a person, why is it important that she dies? Is she the only woman who dies? We have Rachel dies. But what do we know about? Do we know when Leah dies? We don't actually have when Leah dies. So why is it important that a nursemaid of Rivka, which goes back how many years? Rivka is an old lady, right? Yaakov is coming home finally to his mother and father. Who cares that she dies at this point? And why is she even on the trip with him? How did she get there? She's coming back from Lavan's house. Was she in Lavan's house all these years and now traveling back? Did she travel back to Lavan's house with Yaakov, or maybe at a later period of time? So it's not clear. So the Ramban gives a number of conjectures to try to explain it. And to just tell you where this is going, the Ramban is going to say, and the Medrash says the same thing, the death of the nursemaid of Rivka is mentioned as if to hint to us that someone else died who was important, and that is Rivka. That Rivka dies, if not this very moment, but that Yaakov never gets to meet his mother Rivka again. Now, why not? Or why would it happen that way? We say, well, she got old. But why would it not be mentioned? Why not say that Yaakov came home and there was no mother there? Why not tell us about who buried Rivka? Why does it seem the Torah is silent about this? So we're going to look at the Ramban on chapter 35, verse 8. Let's take our Rambans now. Got some Hebrew and English. You took? Okay. You guys got English? Okay, good. All right. What page is it on? Chapter 35, verse 8. I don't have the page.
35 is... 35 is...
You need an English one?
428, 428.
Sharing. Okay, good.
428. Oh, you get different book.
It should be the same book.
This is the same book.
Which verse?
What page you on?
I'm on 428. You're on page 4. Which one?
X. Okay. XXXV, verse 8.
Verse 8? Oh. This is the word I meant.
Here, it looks like it's right here.
Also débrouillé, oui. Yes.
You managed to cope.
Yeah, managed.
423.
Se débrouiller.
So you managed with
No. Anyone have a red Pontiac with this license plate? Nope.
Me?
Nope.
Right, just one.
Garbage truck coming, so it's Thursday, every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday.
Okay, thank you. All right, you got to put a coat on for today. Okay, take it slow. Just don't hit the garbage truck. Garbage truck's a big truck. It is. Okay, we good with page numbers? Okay, so Roy, you can.
What is a wet nurse, first of all?
A wet nurse is a nurse who fed the baby.
Is that what they call wet?
Right. That's what they call wet nurse. She actually nurses the baby.
Why would her mother need a witness?
So it's not clear. Does this mean the wet nurse who raised Rivka is what it looks like?
Oh, the one that fed
The one that fed Rivka. So having a wet nurse was not unusual, right? They didn't have bottles and they didn't have formula, and therefore they had mothers, correct? But maybe the mother was busy with other children, or maybe the mother didn't produce enough milk. So there were women who were hired whose mammary glands produce sufficiently, and as long as you manipulate the mammary glands and you ensure that they are stimulated, so they will continue to produce milk. So I guess some women have more milk than others. So consequently, there was a concept of using women as, and not just maids and servants, a specific part of being a nursemaid.
Yeah.
Okay?
My grandmother.
She nursed the other children.
Mothers used to bring her their babies, and she used to feed them.
So this looks like the simple pshat. This looks like this was the woman who nursed young baby Rivka. Many, many, many years ago. She's got to be ancient. Right? So what's she doing there? So the Ramban has to explain why she's there. The Ramban has to explain why they even tells us. So let's even assume that she's there. Why is this an important fact to know? So we all have it. Most of you have it. Chapter 35, verse 8. Vatamas dvar mekanekes Rivka. Says the Ramban. Lo yadati lama nichnas hapasuk zeh. Why this pasuk comes up? Lamakom kel Beit El. Why does this come up to? You're finding it. Why does this come up to the place that he comes to Beit El? Between Beit El and between Vayirah Elokim Yaakov. Why is this verse 8 interspersed between the whole rest of the story? V'hifsik binyan achad shehaya b'vas achas makom achad. You don't have a 35:8. Lamed Hey Chet.
I'm in Lamed Hey.
No Chet. Vatama Dvara.
Oh, Lamed Hey starts here.
Okay. All right. So Ramban says, I don't know really why this verse is put in the middle of everything. He's on the way home. He builds an altar at Beit El. She dies, and then it goes back to the story about the Beit El story about building the altar in Beit El. Ki Yaakov b'vo Luza, he Beit El banam mizbeach v'kol makom El Beit El. He came to Beit El. He calls the place Kel Beit El. And the God appears to him. Vayivarach oto, and God blesses him. V'lama hu sama katuv hazeh b'tochen yan ached. Why do you intersperse the story? Even if you want to tell me the story, why put it in the middle of the story of bringing the altar in El Beit El, which Yaakov is setting up on the way home? V'yakarov, and the Ramban says, what looks to me to be the most likely answer, Mashamru Rabotenu, what the rabbi said in Breshit Rabbah, Shirmoz Lamitatz Rivka. This is a hint to the fact not only the maidservant or the maid, the wet nurse of Rivka dies, but Rivka herself dies. V'lachein kara shem hamakom alon b'chud, and therefore they call this place the plateau or the tree of crying, the tree of mourning, the tree of sadness. Because it's really not such a sad thing if an old wet nurse is going to die after all these years. What is the great tragedy? What is the great sadness?
She brought him up.
She didn't bring him
like a
up.
mother.
She didn't bring him up.
No, but
Or maybe she did. Maybe she nursed Yaakov, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So maybe she was the wet nurse who raised Yaakov.
Right.
Okay, so this is the old wet nurse.
These wet nurses are almost like mothers, considering
Well,
that they gave you life.
Right, so it's important because she raised him, she nursed him, and now she dies, possibly. But the Ramban thinks there's more of a Yaakov b'cha v'tabel alimot tzadeket asher avto. He's mourning also for the death of his mother, who's not mentioned.
Yeah.
And not just if Rivka, his mother, dies at this point, it means that Yaakov will never get to see his mother again. The tragedy in the story, she had the idea, she says, run away from Esav, you have to save yourself, go up to Lavan and find yourself a wife there. He does. It's her idea, it was her wisdom who made sure that he survived and was not killed by his brother Esav, who was upset that he stole the birthright, and he got the birthright, and he got the bracha from his own father Yitzchak. She died at this point, and she'd never see him again. So therefore, the death of the wet nurse is really a hint of not just the death of the wet nurse, but the death of his mother. Now we haven't explained why the death of the mother is not mentioned. That's the obvious question you're all asking. But this will also explain, and therefore God appeared to him and blessed him at this point. I read it because he's blessing Yaakov to give him the patriarchal blessing. But says the Ramban, the reason God appears to him and blesses him because he wants to give him Nichum Avelim. He's gotten news the wet nurse dies. He gets news that his mother passes away at the same time, or reasonably close, and God appears to him to pay a Shiva call. Kasher asal Yitzchak aviv acharei mot Avraham. The same way that God appears to Yitzchak after Avram dies, which happens in chapter 25. The same story happens. Avram dies, and then God appears to Yitzchak. Why does God appear to Yitzchak? To give him Nichum Avelim. Ubishtem amru chachamim. In both cases, when God appeared to Yitzchak in chapter 35 after the death of Avram, and God appears to Yaakov here at the death of the wet nurse and his mother, the Chachamim say in Gemara Sota, Birchat Avilim Berecho. They blessed the patriarch with the blessing of Birchat Avilim. Hamakom Yinachem Etchem. V'siyor lazeh, and I'll give you a bit of a support that Rivka died. Mashamor lamata, what it says later in chapter 35, verse 27, it says, Vayavo Yaakov Yitzchak aviv Mamrei Kiryat Arba. When he finally gets home, who does he see? He sees Father Yitzchak. He gets back to Kiryat Arba. He gets to Mamre, which is Kiryat Arba, and he meets, he goes back to Yitzchak, his father. Now, what happened to the mother? So you're going to say, well, this is gender bias. The Torah doesn't mention mother. But says the Ramban, no. We say he came to his mother and father. She was the one. She was not just his mom. She was responsible for his whole existence. She sent him away. She was the prime mover. She was the protagonist. She's the main character. And Yitzchak only listened to her. So if you're telling him, one tells the story that he left and he married 2 women and he had family and then he has to deal with Lavan and he has to deal with Esau and finally gets home, it would stand to reason, who would he see when he got home? Mother and father. But she's not mentioned. So it must be that she's no longer alive. So why is she not mentioned? So why did she die in silence? If she's the main figure in the whole Yaakov story, she's the main pusher, she's the main protagonist, she's the main motivator. So why is her death not even alluded to and mentioned?
There's also Esav, no?
There's also Esav, and if there's Esav, what?
It's bad news.
Yes.
She's the mother of not only a tzaddik, but she's also the mother
right.
of...
So the Ramban quotes the Medrash that her passing was not mentioned because what did people say when she passed away? This is the mother of Esau.
Right.
But,
that's what they always...
But won't they say this is the mother of Yaakov? Well, wouldn't they also say this is the mother of Yaakov? Why not?
He was not around.
He's not around. The only descendant they can relate to Rivka for all these 20 years, because he goes to Lavan, he works 7 years for one wife, 7 years for another wife, works another 7 years. He's got 21 years he's away, 22 years until he's away. So for 22 years, the last 22 years of her life, all people know her as the mother of Esav.
But Esav is still sticking around.
Well, at least they knew about him. Maybe he came to visit. Maybe he was here and there. That's what the Medrash conjectures. The Katav Rashi, and Rashi says, this is what Ramban is quoting Rashi, why was the day of Rivka's death left out or relied over or not mentioned? In order not that the people should curse her, that what would they say at her funeral or after her eulogy? Keres sheyatz mimeno Esav. This is the womb. This is the woman who gave birth to Esav. Afakatuv lo persma. So therefore, the Torah doesn't want to publicize it. You know, all these mass murderers, all these people that shoot up all these people. Can you imagine what the mishpacha goes through for the rest of their lives? Their neighbors will know them as the parents, right, of the person who shot up a mall, shot up a church, shot up a synagogue. Can you imagine the guilt that goes on? So therefore, when Rivka dies, it kind of the Torah kind of just smooths it over, doesn't mention it. Ubendrash Chachamim, what Rashi is saying is really a medrash from the Chachamim, said Psik the Rav Kahana. Now, so says the Ramban, but wait. So you know what? The Torah doesn't also tell us about the death of Leah. We know about the death of Rachel. She dies on the road. We have to talk about that soon. But we don't know about the death of Leah. So why is it so important that we don't know about the death of Rivka? The Chachamim are alluding, not only we don't know about when she dies, but the Torah had to kind of insert it in a roundabout way. How do you know that she died? Because the death of the wet nurse is telling me that she dies as well. The only way we know it is by the death of her wet nurse, which is saying we're telling you about the death in a funny way, and it was important, but we don't want to tell you about the death. The Kevin Shadiber Lama Lo Hysteria and Yav Lo Gileo. If you're already telling me that the wet nurse died, tell me that Rivka died at the same time. So then the Ramban says, as I asked you, what about being the mother of Yitzchak, being the mother of Yaakov? And second of all, when Yitzchak dies, V'tama Klalayna Mechuvar says the reason for the curse is not so clear, says the Ramban. Sharei Hiskiro b'mitat Yitzchak, because later on at the end of this chapter, when Yitzchak finally passes away, so it tells us, it says, when Yitzchak dies, Yaakov has come home, and this is a few psukim later, but it's a period of time. Yitzchak lives for 180 years. Yitzchak died and passed away. Vayamat, he dies. Vayasev alamav, he was gathered to his people. Zakein is Sfayamim, very old, 180. Vayikburoto, who buried him, Esav Yaakov banav. Who took care of him at the funeral? Esav and Yaakov. So you see that when Yitzchak is buried, the Torah tells us about it. And who's sitting in the front row of the mourner's pew? Yaakov and Esav. So how come for Rivka, we kind of don't want to mention that Esav's there? No one's got a problem that Esav comes to Yaakov to Yitzchak's funeral. So the answer is, I said, that when Rivka dies, Yaakov is not there. There's nobody. So V'tama Klaloino Mechuvar Shareis Kirobe Mitat Yitzchak. Esav is mentioned when Yitzchak dies. It says Vayikberu Oto. He quotes the verse Vayikberu Oto Esav v'Yaakov Banav. So what's so bad about Rivka dying and Esav will be there? Aval Yitachen Lomar Shelo Haya Kavod B'Mitatal. She did not have any respect at her passing, at her funeral, at her levaya. Why? Ki Yaakov einenu sham. Yaakov is not there. He's away 22 years. Esav soneota. Esav hates her because he didn't get the birthright. V'lo yavo sham. He probably doesn't want to come because he knows that the reason that Yaakov got the birthright and the bracha was who was the mover here. He must have figured out that the whole protagonist who set this up, that someone would come in dressed up and get the bracha before he got it, was his mother. So there's this hatred that he has of his mother, not of his father. His father's just Nebuch Delemachol. He just gave the bracha. He was tricked. Ukinyan azem matzati, and I found this in the Medrash, that the Medrash says, Amru, Ata motzei kishemeta Rivka amrin man yipul kama. When Rivka died, the Medrash is kind of elaborating what happened the moment Rivka died. They said, who's going to take care of her? Who's going to look after her levaya? Who's around? Who's around who can take care of the arrangements? Let's see if that's going to be Mishpacha. Well, Avram died. Yitzchak Yoshev b'bayit beinav kehod. Yitzchak can't see. He's blind. That's how we got into the whole mess with the brachas altogether. So he can't take care of her. He's disabled. He's handicapped, or he can't see. Yaakov halach lo Padan Aram. Yaakov has gone to Padan Aram. He's gone for 2 decades. So Puk Esav Rashir Kama. So will Esav? We're going to have Esav come in front, and he'll be the one to look after her. The Yemra Baraisa, and the people. What will people say? When they see this, they'll say, "Litin Bazya Daha Kiden Yankin." Cursed are these breasts that raise such a child. So what did they do? So the Medrash says, Hotziu mitasa balayla. They actually buried her at night when no one would be there. It's a very quiet, private funeral. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Lafisha Hotziu mitasa balayla lo pershok tuvi mitatal menatzah. Because she was buried quietly at night, therefore the Torah didn't even mention it directly and listed for us. It was a very hush-hush kind of event. And therefore, Hadu Aksiv, this is what it says in what Psukim we had just seen. Vaikwashma alon bachut. This is the tree of bachut, of crying, or the plateau of crying. Shtei bechiyot, 2 cries that were going on, 2 mornings. Hadod achtiv vayivalakim Yaakov evarchato, that God blessed him. Ma bercho berchat avalim bercho. God gave him the bracha of the avalim. So in other words, the Medrash says pretty clearly what the Ramban is suggesting, that when Rivka dies, the only person around that could look after this on behalf of the Mishpacha was Esav. That was not a good thing. So what did they do? They buried her quietly before Esav could actually come there. So no one was there. It was a very hush-hush, very quiet funeral done at night when no one was around, and therefore even the reference, how do we know this? The reference in the Torah is hidden, is obscure, not even mentioned directly. The only way we know about it is the death of the wet nurse.
For a funeral or a thing, do you have to have a minyan or anything like that? Is there a requirement for a number of people to be there?
No, you don't have to have a minyan for a funeral.
Just one person can just...
You can't say Kaddish with them unless you have a minyan.
Right.
So when the Kaddish is recited when the funeral is finished, when the grave is completed, the grave is covered. So if you want to say Kaddish, you would need a minyan. But if there is no minyan, you don't say Kaddish. Right?
So one person can do it.
Yes,
The whole thing.
Yes. You want members of the Jewish faith community to fill the grave in, to do the last respect for the person, rather than simply...
There's nobody there.
Right. Otherwise you'll have the grave diggers do it. Right. Correct. So and therefore, v'hinei bavusha Esav yichidi b'kfurata, because Esav was the only person, I guess, who was at the funeral. Pachadumna klala, they were afraid of the klala that would come. V'lo roshi ela kavod, it wouldn't be a kavod, and this is the inyan of the remez. This is why it's hinted in such an oblique form. Okay.
Who's thinking like that?
Who's
thinking?
thinking?
Who think that it's not a kavod?
To bury someone quietly with no one there.
Like who's worried about this?
The townspeople, the people around.
So they know.
So they know. Yeah, but I don't know. It's like a gangster funeral.
Yeah.
Okay. Like the funeral, the mafia funeral. Except everybody who comes to the mafia funeral, members of the mafia.
Yeah.
For them, it's a kavod.
Now, can I just ask, this
Sure.
is sort of an aside, but when we talk about Isaac having poor eyesight,
Yes.
does that mean he was blind, or is he blind and he couldn't see what was going on?
So it's not clear what it was. It could have been cataracts. Could have been
No,
cataracts.
but could it be that
Could have
maybe
been.
he just didn't see it in front of him, his face, you know?
He didn't. Wait a minute. So he had tunnel vision. He had.
Yeah, he loved Esav, because it says he loved Esav best.
I mean, he couldn't discern.
Yes, he could
So,
discern.
it's-
His mother could see it.
So I would rather read it as a simple meaning that people lose, things begin to kind of work less ideally, less efficiently as a person gets older. So it's very common today. Cataracts are very common surgery.
Yeah.
But you can imagine if you couldn't operate on cataracts, what would that be? A person would lose. First you can't see clearly. Then it becomes, if it really covers over the eyes, it's really been impossible to see. But it could have been any one of a number of other issues. It could have been macular degeneration.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about disease. I'm talking about the fact that he doesn't see what's going on in front of his eyes.
No, it means he can't see. He can't see because he doesn't know who the son is. Remember, when Yaakov comes in, he thinks it's Esav. He says, "I feel the hands. The hands feel like Esav." He's really relying upon his sense of touch because he feels the skins on Yaakov's hand. That means he can't see. He wants to identify who it is. He touches the hands. He smells the garments. He says, "This is the smell of my son." And you have hairy hands like Esav, so you must be Esav. But you sound like Yaakov.
You sound like Yaakov.
So it's clear. It's a physical inability to see. What exactly was the issue? It's not clear. I don't think they knew at this time.
And a little bit of both.
What
The other one also. He didn't see who Esau really was. He didn't see who Yaakov really was.
Right, he can't see. So I don't know now. Why is it?
Physically and
Right. So it's not just. So my part of it maybe he doesn't want to discern, but it's really he can't see. Now, why is it that Yitzchak specifically could not see? We don't find this about Abraham. It looks like Abraham has acute eyesight all the way to the end.
Yes.
So the Medrash suggests a couple of reasons. The Medrash suggests that this was God's way of ensuring that Yaakov would get the birthright. Sometimes stories have difficult twists to them, but it all is really for the good. And the other Medrash that says to us that when Yitzchak was bound with the Akedah, the tears of the angels crying dripped into his eyes, and these supernal tears kind of weakened his eyesight. Maybe. I just like to believe it was something physical.
Yeah. No, I understand. It's just that sometimes, what people say, do you understand? Can you see it? Can you visualize it?
I think it's more.
And I think it's...
I think it's more.
Yeah.
So, anyways, this is why. So Rivka dies at this point, according to Ramban. A lot of commentators, it's not mentioned. What the question we have to actually deal with is who is this Devorah person, and why is she here? That Rivka dies is hinted into the pasuk, but that the Devorah, the Meinekes of Rivka, passes away is clear in this pasuk. And who was this lady, and why is she traveling on with Yaakov? So the Ramban gives 3 reasons why Devorah is traveling with Yaakov. They're conjectures. You can accept any of them or all of them. Actually, you probably can't accept all of them. So it says the Ramban, V'haita Dvorah im Yaakov. The reason that this is continuing the same Ramban. The reason was Dvorah was with Yaakov. Because she came first with Rivka to when Rivka left her home, her father, her mother, and her brother, and came with Yaakov. So it came with Yitzchak, and came to marry Yitzchak in Israel. So she came with Rivka along as some kind of servant. V'yata tavo im Yaakov lerot virta. And it looks like so in other words, the Ramban conjectures she came first with Rivka. She then went back to her own land, which was Paddan Aram, where Lavan was. And now that Yaakov is going back, she says, "Let me go back with Yaakov and meet my old mistress." So I'll just say that again. Look, I think I mashed it up a little bit. The first time this maidservant travels to Israel with Rivka, she decided at some point They withdrew her, come back to Padan Aram. So now she didn't travel with Yaakov, but now that Yaakov is going back, she says, I'll go along for the caravan ride so I can get to see my mistress. That's one reason why she's there. Number one, she comes to see Gverta, to see Rivka, and she never gets to see her. Oh, Shnitaska begidol b'nei Yaakov lechvod Rivka v'lavata v'itav b'beito. The second reason is suggested is because she actually was sent back or she was there to help be the wet nurse for the sons of Yaakov. Same way that she was the wet nurse for Rivka, right? And she may have raised Yaakov and Esav. She may have been the wet nurse for them. So now the next generation, she is now nursing the children of Yaakov for his wife. She's the rotating.
Except she's in her 80s.
She's in
her 80s.
That's fine. As long as the mammary gland is stimulated, this can keep going.
Really?
Okay. Yeah.
This is scientifically proven?
Yes, it's scientifically proven.
80 years old?
I don't know about 80 years old. It's scientifically proven that lactation, once you start lactation, if you keep massaging and stimulating the gland will continue to produce milk. The best proof is that the cows that we use for our milk, they're not all pregnant, they're not all nursing. The milking cows continue to give milk, not only while they're nursing a calf, because we're continuing to stimulate the udder with the milking machine. So as long as you keep stimulating that, it will produce it. There are a few cases of male lactation in the ancient world. You have male nurses, male wet nurses. It is done. It can be done. It actually can be done. And in fact, Moshe, when he complains about the Jewish people in Sefer Bamidbar, he says, "Should I be like a hayonek? Should I be like should I be like the wet nurse?" I forgot the terminology Moshe says. Like the omenet is the nursemaid, omein is a male wet nurse, will carry the onek. So you see that Moshe says, Moshe's complaining to God, I got to take care of these people like a wet nurse takes care of the baby. You're constantly on call. I got no time to rest. But Moshe's a male. So Moshe refers to it in the male term. Omein, not omenet, it's hayonek. The child that nurses, like the male wet nurse will take care of the child. So actually there are cases in antiquity
that could be figuratively speaking.
I'm sorry?
That could be figuratively speaking.
Correct, I'm saying, but biologically speaking, it can be done. You have to really stimulate the male gland, the male breast. The male breast does not have the same amount of fat tissue. Right. By Hiomein es there. What's the what? Really? Is that the Medrash says that? Wow, I never heard that. Okay, but it said about Moshe. Moshe is saying that I'm on call for the Jewish people, like the wet nurse is for the baby. He's referring to a male wet nurse. So in other words, the gland. So can this happen with an 80-year-old woman? I don't know. Okay, but people live much longer. Yitzchak dies at 180, so the years are much more extended for a lot of different things. Avram and Sarah give birth when they're 99, 100, right? So.
Well, Hashem was actively involved.
Yes, okay, right. But I'm saying, whatever it is possible to conjecture this. So one thing is she goes back and now she wants to travel back with the caravan to see Rivka. The second is she was the one who took care of nursing the children and they're traveling, so she's part of the family, so to speak. It's possible, or it's likely, that she is not the meinikta, the nursemaid that's mentioned when they travel, when Rivka travels. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe that she was a meineket, or that was a different meineket who stayed back with the house of Lavanu B'Tuel. Came back later on. And now he's bringing her back, so they'll bring kavod to his mother. It's possible because we find that many times nobility had multiple wet nurses. Because he says it's hard to imagine this is the Zakena, the old nursemaid that there was many years ago. She's 80. Maybe this is a different individual. So it's possible that it was the original one. It's possible it's a different one. It's possible she wants to come back to see Rivka. It's possible he wants to take her to see Rivka. It's possible that she traveled back and forth. So it gives a number of reasons why it is, but it's not out of the ordinary that she would actually travel with Yaakov. Okay, one more Ramban. This is verse 16. Okay, death of Rachel. This Ramban is extremely important because when the Ramban, we know the Ramban actually travels to Israel, and I've told you this a few times. The Ramban was forced to represent the Jewish people against Pablo Christiani in a very famous debate in Spain. The Ramban won. The judges who judged the debate were Christian judges, so they were stacked against them, but they had to admit that he won the debate. He won the debate. Pablo Christiani, who was a Meshumad and apostate, lost the debate. The Ramban everybody was happy because if the Ramban would have lost the debate, the Jews would have lost. So they couldn't persecute the Jews because their defender defended them well. But the Ramban began to realize and began hearing murmurings that they were going to, knock him off, like what was the Saudi Arabian? Khashoggi, right? Okay, they didn't like him. He was speaking. He wasn't a good figure for the Saudis, so they kind of took him apart. So Ramban began hearing the same thing could happen to him. So he actually hopped on a boat. No true story. Hopped on a boat and he went to Israel. He travels to Israel. And he writes about it. We have a letter that he sends back where he has come to Israel and how destroyed it is. There's no one around. The place of the Beis HaMikdash is destructed. There's not even a minyan in there. I'll just read you a piece of the letter. He says, there's nobody there. There's no Jews living in Jerusalem. Because since when the Tatars came, these are Arabs, Baruch Mehem, the Jews ran away, Mehem Shnergu B'Charbam, and some of the Jews were killed. Now, all we have living in the Jerusalem area, two Achim, two brothers who are dyers, D-Y-E-R-S, Konim Atzviyam and Amoshel, and to them, V'alehem Yesu ad minyan mitpalim b'veitam b'Shabbatot, and to them come together a minyan of people on Shabbos, every Shabbos in Jerusalem, and sometimes we don't even have a minyan. And we've seen this, and he says the Beis HaMikdash destroyed, and in place of the Beis HaMikdash there is a mosque with a kippah with a dome on it. No, he's actually referring to what he saw. It was called a kippah, and we collect. No, it's what they call. It's called in Hebrew kippah. The dome is a kippah. Yes. The kippah comes. The term kippah comes from that. So and so forth. They built a synagogue and they set things up. And he writes how he actually was helpful in terms of raising the level of status in Yerushalayim. But in this, so we know he comes there, we know he stays in Yerushalayim, he actually eventually moves back to Akko, which is a much more civilized area at that point. It's a Crusader city, and it is more fortified, and he actually is able to live out his years in Akko, and he never goes back to Spain. So he does in a couple of places insert emendations and changes to his manuscript about his Perush on the Torah, and this is one of them. So I want to show this to you. On verse number 16. So the Torah said to us that Rachel dies and she is Kivrat Eretz away from Ephrata. Ephrata is Ephrat and actually refers to Beit Lechem. And it's not clear to people how far is Kivrat Eretz. What does Kivrat Eretz mean? It's a very strange term. Eretz means land. What does Kivrat mean? Kivrat. Well, there is a tomb there, but she's buried Kivrat Eretz, a distance away from Beit Lechem. How far she buried away. So people didn't know what this meant. People who are living in Europe had no clue what this really meant. How far and how close was the tomb of Rachel to Beit Lechem? People don't travel back and forth to Israel. And the Jewish community in Israel is actually very small. As I just told you, the Ramban goes there. It's a tiny community living in Jerusalem. You got to really, and you want to go out into the wilds to go from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, you're taking your life into your hands. It's not like today that you drive on the road. So the Ramban says, he tries to suggest various different things, how much it is. So first he says Menachem, this is Kivrat Eretz, verse 16. Menachem was a medieval lexicographer. He wrote a dictionary of various different words. Menachem Perish, Lashon Kabir Mahalach Rav. It was a very far distance away from where Rachel died to where Beit Lechem was. And he says, and he gives an example about it. He says, the Agada says, in the Medrash Agada, that when the land is dried out, that says that Bizman she'aretz chalula kvara shehanir matzui v'astav avar v'adayin asrav lavar. It's actually referring to a time of the year where it's not easy. It's easy to walk. Nonetheless, it's still far away. And says the Ramban, it's not really what it means, because we find actually that it really refers to a length of space of land. It doesn't mean a time period or time of year. Kivrat Eretz doesn't refer to the condition of the land, it refers to an area. We're going to go to the next of the line. What seems to me to be right is what the Radak, Rav David Kimchi, wrote. The word kivrat, the kaf, is not moved upon the root. The word is bra. Kivrat means like broad, ledimyon ve'inenu shoshit, and the word means levarot. It's like barot lomo, or vatavreni, or whatever it is. And he says it's like the time period that you would take to walk refers to a little bit that you eat in the morning. So the amount of time you would take between breakfast until you eat lunch. You have a little bite in the morning, and then your main meal would be later in the day. How long could you walk? 4 hours to go from one place to the other, which is pretty much like almost a half a day, 4 or 5 hours. You get up at the crack of dawn, you go to work, and then you break at midday. So in other words, this is not really a period of a slice of land. It's the amount of time you would normally walk for morning, getting up, until you come to lunchtime. So 4 hours, 5 hours, whatever it is. And look what the Ramban says. This is what I wrote initially. And now that I have been Zocha, he's writing this in the present. Now I'm putting this in. Now that I came to Yerushalayim, Shevach Lakel Tov Amitiv, praise God who's good and does good. Roiti b'einai, I saw in my eyes, Shem in Kfuat Vachel Beit Lechem Afilu Mil, from Rachel's tomb until Bethlehem, is at less than a mil. It's right on top of it. You can't travel from Rachel's tomb to Bethlehem because it's closed off. It's closed off, but Kever Rachel is really right outside Beit Lechem.
How much to Efrat?
I'm sorry?
How much to Efrat?
So Efrat is a little further, but if you look, and the second time the pasuk tells about Efrat, it says when he buries her and he puts a matzeva. He matzevet k'rochel at. I'm sorry. She dies, but tikover b'derech Efrata he Beit Lechem. She dies on the way to Efrat, which is Beit Lechem. So it's identifying Efrat as another name for Beit Lechem, not Efrat that we know today as Efrat.
I'm not sure, because I could say on the way to Efrat, but this place where she is buried is Beit Lechem, on the way to Efrat.
But she's buried on the way.
Right. It's like Beit Lechem has many sides, and right. She's on the side when you go towards Efrat.
It looks like she is. I'll read the pasuk. Vatamat Rachel, Vatikaver b'derech Efrata. She's buried on the road to Efrat.
Right.
Okay. Which is Beit Lechem. Which is Beit Lechem. That's one place. The previous place where it says where she died, she was Kivrat Eretz Lavo Efrata. She was a Kivrat Eretz to go to Efrat. So it's not clear. So what the Ramban is just simply saying is that it may be a distance to go to Efrat, but why didn't Yaakov bury her in Beit Lechem? Okay, it's not clear how the relationship to Efrat. You're right, but she buries her on the road. People aren't normally buried on the road. They're normally buried in ancestral tombs. The Marat Machpelah, the cave, was a cave when Avram buried to bury himself and his wife and the other generations. Even what we know about burials in the ancient world, they're all buried together. She looks like there's a solitary grave. Why is she buried there? Why not bury her? Why not find a Beit Kfarot in Beit Lechem? Why not find a Beit Kfarot in Efrat?
Why not in Hebron?
Hebron is a little further.
Yeah, but not that much.
Okay, so you'll see the answer that the Ramban will answer about Hebron too. Okay? So says the Ramban, why was she actually buried? So first of all, he sees that it's not that far to Beit Lechem. It's not like we're talking about great distances. And you know what the truth is? Not that far to Efrat, and it's not that far to Hebron either. And therefore, the parish that we gave before, that's a far distance, is really not true, and Menachem's parish is not true. It's like what Rashi said. It's a length of land. V'ein bo toar rak haskama b'rov hashemot. This actually was some type of name that they used, and sometimes there are nicknames for different lengths of distances. V'akaf l'shimush, and the kaf is just to be the preposition. Shalom nimdad v'kivun. It was not exactly a kivrat eretz. It was like a kivrat eretz, like a kilometer, about a kilometer, etc., etc., etc. Ramban gives a little bit of dikduk here. He says it's like a kilometer. He tries to explain to what it was, and so it's a really short period of time. It's a short distance that people would normally measure out, like a kilometer, like a mil, which is a kilometer, and it's called the Bata Aretz. They would call this Bata Aretz, the daughter of the land. It's like the daughter of Parsal. So why does he bury her there? So we've agreed it's not a great distance. So what's the purpose of burying her here? And also he says something else. I saw something else that I now realize is not true what I thought before. So when the Jewish people are going out of Israel, it says Kol Brama Nishma. A voice is heard on Ramah. Rachel Mavaka al Banel. Rachel is crying for her children, which seems to imply where was she buried? Kol Brahma Nishma. She's buried in some kind of heights. So says the Ramban, now that I saw where the Kever Rachel is, she's not buried on a height. It's not on a height. Ramot is on a height. There are parts of Jerusalem that are on the high parts of the hills. Not where Kever Rachel is. Kever Rachel is actually going down. So it's not on a height. V'lo karov la. So it must be Aval Ramah Shel Binyamin Rachok Mimena Kaba Pasod. The Ramah, the heights where the tribe of Binyamin, which is north of Jerusalem, are 4 parsot away. That's Persian miles. Ramah Sheba Har Ephraim, the Ramah in Har Ephraim is far away. Yoter Mishneimim, it's a 2 days journey. So therefore, what does it mean when it says in Yirmiyahu 31, the voice is heard on the heights? It's a militza. It's a linguistic, a literary device. Kederach mashal lomar ki ayta Rachel tzoeket b'kol gadol mispeid mar ad shishma kol me'rachol kir barama shehi brosh hahar livna al Binyamin. It means when Rachel saw the Jewish people leaving on the way out of the exile, her voice was so loud, so crying so loud. Spiritually, it was like the voice could be heard far away, even on a Ramah, as if you were shouting off the top of a mountain where the voice carries that far. That's how loud it was. So why did he bury her there? Why does he bury her where she is? She's not on a Ramah, she's not in a family tomb. So says the Ramban as follows, V'ner beinai, he buried her on the road. He didn't bring her into the city of Beit Lechem Yudah to find the burial point, which was close, Akrava Sham. He saw that Beit Lechem Ephrata is going to be in the area that belongs to Yehudah. Okay, Yehudah is south. When you travel into the Gush today, you're going into the area of Yehudah. It's called the Judean Hills. It was actually part of what Yehudah was. If you want to know where Binyamin is, which was the area of Binyamin, it's actually north of Jerusalem. The area north of Jerusalem, where Ramallah is, where Sagot is, where Beit El is. That's the area close to Binyamin. After the Kotel. Past the Kotel, outside Jerusalem even.
Right, but Binyamin was...
Right, but the Talmud tells us that there wasn't really straight lines. It was like gerrymandered districts. Everybody know what gerrymandering is? That's an American term. No one knows gerrymandering. Gerrymandering, okay, you've heard the expression. It means when they set up districts in the United States, sometimes the political parties try to reform the districts. So you have like little fingers of streets going in because they want to maximize where their party strengths are. So instead of having the first district, second district, like first ward, second ward, third ward in straight lines, you have little squiggles in and out. So that part of that existed for the Beis HaMikdash. Part of that existed where this place where Yaakov buries Rachel, he could bury her in a place that belonged to the future division that would go to Benjamin. So he wants to bury her there in the place of Binyamin. Bury her where her son Binyamin would inherit it, because that's the son that's being buried now. Where she's buried is buried near the Beit El in the border of Binyamin, and this is exactly what it says in Sifrei. Binyamin Meita, she died in the area of Binyamin, in the area to be given to Binyamin, as it says in Vizot HaBracha, and so forth and so on. So therefore, the reason that Yaakov buries her there, he has this premonition, he has this understanding, he has this vision. This will one day be the part of where her son will get the inheritance. This is the son that's born, the last son. I'm going to bury mom in that future generation where it will be Binyamin's. Okay, so that's the Ramban. But the key is, I think the key for this Ramban, I want you to see, is sometimes you see geography and it changes it. Right? Anytime anyone's been to Israel, understands that right away. Okay? Now, I got a few minutes. I want to tell you very quickly over a Nesivos Shalom. I'm not sure how much of this I'll do inside. Okay, maybe I'll do it more just verbally, orally outside. Nesivos Shalom is Shlama Rebbe. For those who haven't heard Nesivos Shalom, which is our friend Roy, it's a lot of Hasidus. You like Hasidus? You don't like Hasidus? You like Hasidus? Maybe. You're about to find out. Okay.
What is it?
Did I give you the right one? Yeah. Okay. So here we go. So it says the Nesivos Shalom as follows. He says the story of Yaakov has all these different conflicts that really exist between himself and between Esav and between himself and between Lavan. And the question is, if you look at all the other patriarchs, you don't find that this kind of conflict goes on all the time. They have lives to live. Avram's life is more of a life of dealing with the Almighty and doing the messages and doing the test that the Almighty gives to Avram. Yitzchak is a quiet kind of guy. He does have problems, and there are Philistines, and there are other people. But by and large, it seems to be a peaceful life. Yaakov's life is really about a life of conflict. He's got conflicts with Esav. He's got a conflict with Lavan. That's his entire life. When he leaves Lavan, he comes back to meet Esav again. He's got to wend his way through it. That's the first half of the parsha. So how is it that this is the life of what Yaakov is? I mean, so what the Nesivos Shalom says, if you look on the first page in Reish Yud Aleph, this is the page that looks like this. If you look on the left column, on the second to last left column, V'yesh Lomar. Okay, just going to read this paragraph here. V'yesh Lomar. So he says in the Shlama Rebbe, Darei Yaakov b'chir avot. Yaakov is the chosen of all the avot, of all the patriarchs. V'yashmo mit yachasim Yisrael ha'nikroim b'nei Yisrael. And through him are all the Jewish people are identified, are given identity. We are Yisrael. He's called Yisrael. And the reason all these fights and all these conflicts are written here is teaching us to give us a lesson that the life of every Jew there are different types of fights that we have. Not political fights, not military fights. The battles we face are battles with the Yetzer Hara, battles with the forces, the spiritual forces that weaken us. And even you never get away from it. Every day there's another challenge, and every day the Yetzer Hara has another thing that tries to weaken you. You can't say that I won today, I'm going to put everything away and I can just go on. Every day and every month and every year there are different challenges that pop up. And the truth is, he says, in the same way that Yaakov came out victorious in all these challenges, and he even benefited from it, because when he comes to Lavan, he ends up with being a rich man, leaving Lavan, even though he had those conflicts with Lavan. He ends up getting the bracha, he gets the bechora from Esav, or from his father. So, you end up really positive, you grow from it. It's the same way that Yaakov grew physically, materially from all the conflicts that he had, so too a member of the Jewish faith community will grow from all the troubles and all the difficulties we have and all the fights and mavakim and conflicts that the Yetzer Hara puts against us. So that's really why the story of Yaakov is a story about conflicts, because Yaakov is the one who is our direct ancestor. We're called Bnei Yaakov, we're called Bnei Israel. Then he says like this, and this I'll just talk about outside. He says there are two types of things that the Yetzer Hara tries to weaken us at. Okay, one is in our thinking, and one is in our act. He says Lavan is what is Lavan identified as? Lavan is a tricky kind of character. He wants to flip the wives. He does flip the wives. He tries to trick Yaakov. Yaakov is forced to work in a wily way to get his some sheep. Because Lavan doesn't want to give it to him. Lavan is duplicitous. He said, let's be friends, and so forth. So therefore, the Yetzer Hara sometimes works on our mind, sometimes plays with our mind. It's an intellectual conflict. And he says, and that is maybe one of the worst situations because it weakens our emunah. Not about getting us to do an Aveira. It gets us to weaken in what our belief system is, and what we are, who we are. If you lose your emunah, if you lose your belief, then you're nothing. And that's why the Haggadah says, remember, Arami Ovei Ravi, the Lavan Bikesh, Lakar Esakol. The Haggadah says that Lavan wanted to wipe out everything. We had problems in Mitzrayim, but before that we had Lavan. Why did Lavan want to destroy everything? Because if Lavan represents the forces that want to weaken our emunah, if you have no belief, where do you go? You lost everything. You lost your identity. I mean, a Jew who sins can always return. If you break a law, so you'll do tshuva. But if you lose who you are, you lose the belief in God, you become an agnostic, it's very difficult to change that. So Lavan represents, if you will, the fights that we have with the Yetzer Hara about Amunah, Pagam be'Amunah. That's one. And then on the other hand, you have the fights that we have with Esav, and Esav is more of an earthy kind of person. The fights that we have in this world are really fights about taivas, about things that we want to be physical. What do people do? They don't want to keep the laws because the laws they feel are an onus, our responsibility, take us away from enjoying the world. I want to do things on Shabbat that I can't do. So I have to give up those things. I want to have enjoyment, lust after things. So those are the two things that the Esav wants to weaken me. Not so much in my thinking. I know who I am, but just practically speaking. Now in that there are two types of forces that Esav has. Okay, and when Yaakov is going to meet Esav, do you remember what he says? He says, "I'm afraid to meet Esav Achiv." At the beginning of the parsha, they said, "Esav, your brother." And Yaakov says, "Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav." He says to God, "Save me from my brother, from Esav." So there are two kinds of Esav. One is the Esav that is clearly antagonistic to us, and the other is the Esav that kind of pretends to be our friend, to be our achi. So two types of actions, two types of Yetzer Hara, two types of tactics the Yetzer Hara does in terms of trying to weaken us down. Sometimes it's very clear that he wants us to do things that are prohibited. He's the Esav. And sometimes he'll say, no, you can do the mitzvah, but I want you to do the mitzvah with a poor kavanah. So even the things that are permissible, this kind of Esav is pretending to be achi. I'll let you do the mitzvah, but I'll weaken you in how you do the mitzvah and why you're doing the mitzvah. So that's why sometimes Esav is Esav, the enemy, and sometimes Esav is Esav who is Esav achi. My brother. What do you mean my brother? My brother that once I do the mitzvah, but let me just ruin how you do it. So keep Shabbos, but walk around the whole day Shabbos, feel that this is just a burden. You miss the beauty of Shabbos, right? Feel that there is all kinds of responsibilities, denials that I have to do in life. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'll keep all the mitzvot, but I'm not going to enjoy the mitzvot. That's the work of the Yetzer Hara sometimes as well. So therefore, what he says basically, you've got the whole story of Yaakov with all these fights is to tell me that guess what? Yaakov is me. I'm the descendant of Yaakov. We're his descendants. He's our ancestor. The same way his life was a fight against the Yetzer Hara. There's the Yetzer Hara that works in my mind, the Lavan. There's the Yetzer Hara that works in my actions, and even the actions, there are actions that are prohibited, he works on me to do, and then there are actions, even if they're permitted, he kind of tweaks them for me that makes me feel that they're negativity mitzvos. That's the whole purpose of the parsha itself. It's a long piece in the Tivot Shalom, but that's the key of keys from that piece.